Maroney, so we're not,
We have feedback.
okay, well, we're live now. Okay, so we've just gone live.
Okay.
Do we have feedback? Is it us?
Is it okay?
Us.
I'll put in my.
That's all I can-
Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. So
Okay.
it's April 4th in Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We have two more committee members who are trickling in. We're having a pretty big snowstorm up here. I don't know how
Oh,
the
wow.
weather is down there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm actually at a conference in DC, so it's
Oh,
cloudy,
okay.
but it's
Is it possible to put your volume up a little?
yeah, let me see what I can do.
That would be great.
Oh, we can adjust the volume on the iPad. Thank you, Magali. Okay.
Okay.
How's
All right.
that?
That's better.
That's okay, that was enough problem. We also don't have our committee assistant because of the weather, so
Oh.
so it's me.
It's us.
Hi, Mike. Do you need us? Oh, thank you. Yeah, we just did the volume. We're really proud of ourselves. Magali's helping us. Thank you. So Senator Maroney, the committee has heard a lot about you from me. Some of them have seen pictures of you.
And from Scott.
And from
You have a big
the
fan
House
base.
Committee, big fan base. I tried to let them know we also took a lot of your sports betting language that is protective of consumers and kids. So we appreciate that. We appreciate the work you do, and we're glad you're with us. Would it help if we introduced ourselves? Is that
Oh yeah, that would be great.
okay? Well, you know me, Senator Keisha Rothschild, I Chittenden County.
And I'm Randy Brock. I represent Franklin County and part of Grand Isle County, and I'm Senate Minority Leader.
And I'm Wendy Harrison. I represent Windham County, and I'm the closest to Connecticut.
That's right.
It's right.
Did wait to you when I was
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and we appreciate your training, your support of train service actually.
And we're missing Ann Cummings, who should be here any moment. And I'm Allison Clarkson. I represent Windsor County, which is just above Windham County, so reasonably close to Connecticut.
Okay.
But very close to the Connecticut River and Dartmouth, so we're sort of central. And I'm the majority leader in the Senate.
Oh wow. Okay, great. Very nice to meet you all.
It's good to see you. Thank you for being such a great resource to as we data privacy work.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm glad I can help. I think one of my Delegate Maldonado from Virginia says it best. This is not an I problem, it's a we problem. So we do need to work together on this. And it's been a great, Senator Rodriguez from Colorado was a great help to me. And then we've worked together with a number of the other states as well. So I don't know if you wanted me to just give you some of my thoughts or if you had questions for me. But
I think both. I actually, what was nice was we finished our walkthrough of this bill yesterday, so we're not far ahead of you. And
okay.
I circled things where I thought you'd have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear what your general take is first. That'll probably answer a lot of those questions.
Yeah, no, I went through the bill. I've marked it up. I didn't go through the data broker piece, but I went through the other pieces of the bill. And it's one of the things about the data privacy is that I think it's iterative, right? That each state we're kind of building on each other, and ironically, Washington State really created this framework. Senator Carlisle, and they haven't passed a bill in Washington State yet. All of the other states, with the exception of California, have built on that same framework and taken it and made small or somewhat small, sometimes a little bigger tweaks. I know, Representative Elkins is running a version in Minnesota this year where To him, precise geolocation data is very important, so he's changed that definition and some of the other requirements. Senator Zolnikoff from Montana was the first who lowered the data threshold from 100,000 down to 50,000, and then Rep. Krista Griffith from Delaware, in her bill, she lowered it further to 35,000, and also she cleaned up the publicly available information exemption, which is a little too big. And so in Oregon made some nice cleanups as well that I see you've taken in those cleanups in the exemptions for the tightening up basically the entity level exemption that we had given to GLBA entities. The way you've tightened it up. So what had happened is in Texas, they found that car dealers were claiming the GLBA entity level exemption because they have financing units. And I believe, and I have to check my notes, but the DFTC has actually ruled that they would be eligible to take that exemption, as well as auto manufacturers who are now selling the location data are also potentially going to claim that exemption, the GLBA entity level exemption. And so the way you've drafted it, where the entity is only for the financial institutions regulated, purely financial institutions regulated by your state, and the data level is for the GLBA, that would prevent that loophole, right, of having the car dealers and the auto manufacturers. So that's a great addition you've made. I liked the additions you'd made in sensitive data that made sense. I don't know why we didn't think of that with, the undergarment clad areas or naked photos, again, making that sensitive information. I think that was very good. You expanded the rights. Most of the other states, it was just the 5 rights that we were granting. You added that 6th right to get a list of the third parties where your data was sent, which is an expansion of the rights available. So I liked that. And again, like I said, it's an iterative process, and a lot of states have taken things, and it's good that you're also pushing it forward. And then we learn, and then we'll go back and fix our bill to match some of the things that you're doing. Some of the suggestions that I did have were around the definition, the biometric data definition. In our definition of biometric data, we had an exclusion that biometric data does not include a digital or physical photograph, an audio or video recording, any data generated from a digital or physical photograph, or an audio or video recording, unless the data is generated to identify a specific individual. So, and what that allows is that would allow you to have like security cameras, right? But not to be doing facial rec necessarily.
Right.
And
definition.
Yeah.
So that was on page 2, the biometric data definition. The other one was an exemption on page 50, line 20, where you give.
Sorry, I hate to ask James, but we were just finding you. I hadn't realized I thought you were actually in the part that discusses biometric data. I didn't realize you were just on the definition.
I'm sorry.
What were your suggestions for the definitions?
And I'll send you my notes on that.
Right.
We had something in there that just said that, and it came from actually a Maryland task force. Again, it's all borrowed, right? Borrowing is the sincerest form of flattery. So, but this was from a Maryland task force where we just said that data, what it did not include, biometric data does not include, and excluding a photograph unless it's intended to identify someone. Let's see. Yeah, again, so you had great additions to the sensitive data definition, great job lowering the threshold, great job tightening the GLB entity exemption on page 20. One thing that, as we move, right, the comprehensive data privacy is really the first level, and then before you would do any AI regulations, because, AI, it's all based off of the data, right, and creating these data rights. I'm not sure if it's something now, but something in the future, and we're thinking of this as well. But a lot of people, like in the AI Bill of Rights, the White House's blueprint for the AI Bill of Rights, and other members of civil society, they point to, the human intervention and having a human in the loop. So at some point, expanding the right to, right now, you do the same as we did, and giving the right to process out of solely automated decision making. So at some point, it may want to expand beyond solely automated, but I don't know if that's right now. We haven't done that yet. It's something in the future we'll look at. But it's just a point for future consideration. Yeah, I noticed you give the agents, we did that as well. In Connecticut, you gave them the right to delete as well as to opt out. The one thing I noticed, and so again, it's a little, because states have different drafting conventions, some of the questions I'm going to bring up are probably related to that. I don't know if a reasonable period is defined in Vermont law, but if
Right.
not, on page 27, you may want to define what a reasonable period is to notify that they have to appeal. And I can look back what we had, for some reason, like 15 days sticks in my head, but it may have been 30 days, but it's just something to consider. And let's see, you tightened up the loyalty program language. And then
Is that okay?
Senator Harrison wanted,
Yeah, thank you. I think it was 2 comments ago, you talked about a human intervening in the process.
Right.
That's something we haven't discussed, at least in committee.
No.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? Do you mind?
Yeah, I'll expand on it. And it's something really you probably don't want to do now because it's a little bit further, but it's something to consider for the future. And so what you're giving is you give people the right to opt out of a solely automated decision, right, that has a significant the processing for a solely automated decision. But those words solely automated means that it has to be completely automated, so that if a human were looking at it and making the final decision, right, if you submitted for something, it narrowed it to 5 and the human picked a 1 or something, then that you wouldn't have the right to opt out of that. But in the White House, the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, they talk about, we should have in the future, when we create that, if we ever create that Bill of Rights, a human in the loop who is reviewing, or the right for human review of a decision that's made about you. And so again, that's more looking towards the AI regulations and probably more into the future, but it's something to consider that I wouldn't say necessarily to do now, but it is great that you're putting that in, that right to opt out of the processing for the solely automated decision, because that's a big first step.
Okay, thank you.
while we're still talking about, I don't know, kind of this past section and data rights, do you think this bill helps with deep fakes? Now, like just biometric data use, your ability to delete. It just seems to be like the big problem of the moment.
Yeah, that's, it's
That's a big.
it's a very good question. So we have like our legislation to criminalize the deep fakes, and
Okay.
New York State had already done that. Minnesota has already done that. So they have great models. And
So we might just add a piece that criminalizes deep fakes if we don't feel like it's taking care of.
yeah, I think because I would need to think more on that if this would cover that, because you did add, right, the opt-in for the data for the photos for your the undergarment clad areas. And so if you didn't give someone permission, but I don't know if that applies or if you need to update the definitions. Let me think about that a little bit. But the way we're handling it this year is we have a bill to criminalize the sharing of a non-consensual intimate image. And that, the deep fakes, I know we're all concerned as politicians about elections, and probably rightfully so, but 96% of deep fakes are these deep fake porn, right? It's non-consensual intimate images, and the harm that is done specifically, mainly to young women and girls, right? That this harm is done. And we need to do, that's one of those known risks that we do really need to address now. There's a professor at George Washington who you may want to reach out to on that. And I'll put in a note to make an introduction, but Mary Ann Franks has come up with some model legislation on this, as well as you can look at the Minnesota and Minnesota
said New
did
York.
both. Yeah,
You
Minnesota and New York.
Too?
And Minnesota did both at the same time, the elections and the intimate images, non-consensual
Right.
intimate images.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for that slight detour.
Yeah.
But-
Yeah, no.
Other
I have
thoughts on the-
ADD, so it's easy for me to go off off track.
There's gotta be some undiagnosed folks in our chamber as well.
Yeah, the other suggestion that I would have for you, and it's something that we've just realized, and again, this may be more of a policy decision for you if you wanted to do this, but on page 50, line 20, it's where we give some of the exemptions, right? And we do want to exempt and allow for fraud detection, right? But the way the exemption is crafted, and we only learned it through experience in Connecticut, right? That it allows for facial recognition, right? And so since we're trying to tighten up and say that, you know, you're using a picture of your face to identify you as sensitive data that should be opt-in, this would allow for if a store wanted to use facial recognition to detect people when they were coming in. So
Right.
I can send you some wording to that you could add to that that the beginning of that. So I have that in my written comments that I will send along, but you may want to add something to the beginning of because let me see if I open up.
So are you on number
Yeah.
10, James? Are you on 10 or 11? Because we don't have a line 20 on that page.
It's 11.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, let me
11. Yeah, like, just see.
let me make sure I'm pulling up the right. I have like 3 different
No, I
bills.
think-
I have
We
2
found it.
Connecticut bills and then your bill up on my computer. So
It's number 11.
Yeah.
We've, that's good, and I think we talked about this, but there's this spectrum where, sometimes it's legitimate to, look for a repeat retail offender, et cetera, but
right.
this used against like a lawyer who works in a firm who was working on a case against like a stadium and she got kicked out of the game. So, it has like a real
What's
cascade
the page number,
effect.
Jill?
51,
51.
line
Number
4,
11.
line 4, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is probably good to, like you said, to learn from those situations. So how do you see how
So these
far we
are-
wanna go?
These are exemptions.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, right. And I'll send you the link, but the way we did it in the AI, we haven't addressed it in the data privacy yet. It maybe next year, but it would be by any means other than facial recognition, prevent, detect, protect against, or respond to identity theft, fraud, harassment. That's one way to do it. But again, it is a balance, right? We're balancing the right to privacy with, and so I don't know if I can tell you what works
No,
best
that's-
with
but it's-
Ron, other than to point that out.
Good flag, yeah. Okay.
And those were my main comments. I'm happy to answer any questions on on other issues or if I can help in any way.
I think we should start with the private right of action.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The $1 billion+ question. And I don't want to put you in an awkward position, right? Because you're seen as this expert. I know what it's like to sort of feel like you're caught in a political conversation about how to move forward. But whatever you feel comfortable talking about why you didn't, and more about the other states and why they.
Yeah, I'm
as
happy to talk about it. So I think I may have, so we didn't get intense lobbying in Connecticut only because I never included it, right? It was the
Right.
subject of intense lobbying in Washington State, which I often reference, Washington State, where they haven't had a split over whether to include it or not. There is a form of it so none of the comprehensive data privacy laws that have passed have the private right of action. There is a small, I think other than, right, so the Illinois had the BIPA, the Biometric Information Protection Act, that does have a private right of action. And I need to read through the My Health, My Data in Washington State, but I think it is also a little, they don't allow for damages. So there is a
There's
there is a
something wrong.
private right of action, but it's restricted, right, in some ways. So that being said, you know, there are approaches that, like, I understand the argument, right, that there's no rights without recourse. For me, it was a pragmatic decision. I worked on this bill for 3 years, so the first year I was willing to, like, cut it back to just a privacy policy, and I couldn't even get it out of committee. People got to other members of my committee who they flipped votes on me, and I wasn't able to. The second year, we were able to get it out of the Senate in the budget, and then it got stripped out because of lobbying. So I always think it's funny that they say industry wrote the bill now when I fought them for 3 years. But anyways, neither here nor there. And it got stripped out of the budget and sent back to us, so it didn't pass. So then again, like, with that experience, that was just an extra hurdle. I didn't want to fight, right, in Connecticut. So now the difference is we do have a data privacy unit in our Attorney General's office. We had one of the first data privacy units. I worked with them. They did want this. And so one of the considerations is ability to enforce, right? And so for Vermont, where I understand you have a smaller unit of people who would be able to enforce this, so that may be a consideration. The other thing, you know, I do notice there is a right to cure before the private right of action in yours. Another suggestion may be to look at the ADPPA, and in their private right of action, it's just tied to the rights, right? So, like, should you be able to sue because someone doesn't have a good privacy policy, right? Or they haven't done some of the other things, versus if they violated your right, you know, you told them not to sell their data and you sold their data. So these are all, again, this is going to be a very Vermont specific, right? I'm trying to point out some of the considerations for you and ways you may consider splitting it, you know, if you needed to narrow it. But
Yeah.
it is being lobbied now on, I don't have it in the bill, but they're in the AI bill that I'm working on, but there are potential backdoors. Like, some of the enforcement mechanisms may allow for that. And I do hear a lot from companies on that.
Okay, Senator Hudson.
Thanks, James. My understanding from our House colleagues who did this work, and I know you've been working closely with, is that you, in retrospect, had wished you had put it into your bill and wished it was there. And that I'd love to have you speak to why you think the way it's crafted, our bill works with the cure, because the cure seems to have impact on people's support of this inclusion.
Yeah. So there were other items that I didn't get in the bill that I wish I had, right? Like, my regrets were more around giving too many entity level exemptions. But I think I had talked about my regrets, and I talked about the intense lobbying in Washington State, you know, on the private right of action. I think that the cure gives companies an ability to fix the issue if it's fixable.
Right.
The AG, you know, our AG's office, you know, they have said in testimony that they feel it hampers their ability to do enforcement, right? That they have to wait if you require a notice. But I think the overall cure, right, for that enforcement, you have that expires, it sunsets like we did, right, with the and then goes to more of a permissive cure.
What is that?
Yeah, what, can you help us understand?
Our cure, like,
No, I
your
just-
provision expires.
So they have 60 days, right, to keep.
Right.
Right.
So they have 60 days. So the AG, before doing enforcement, has to send a notice of violation. They have if they deem that it's curable, right? Like there are some things that you may not be able to fix. And then the company would have those 60 days to fix it, notify them. And then if they don't, then the AG could start an enforcement action. But
Right.
what happens is after ours was 18 months. I can't remember. I'd have to look back in your bill. I don't remember when the date was. I think it was just about you gave them a year. And then after that, the AG would not have to send that notice with the right to cure. They could start enforcement action right away, but they potentially could give a right to cure, depending on, and what we were told that, is that they always have that ability to give a right to cure an AG. And I borrowed the permissive cure from a Florida bill, Fiona McFarland's bill down in Florida. But this just kind of lays it out. So it gives the companies a little more certainty. So it,
You mean in our bill that gives
yes.
companies?
Yep. Yep.
And
You
I
have the
think-
same thing in there that we had, the
Right.
permissive cure.
So overall, my sense from business and from all of us is that we appreciate
We're
clarity
hear from
and
them.
certainty. So I mean if what we've done is help that, I think it's good to know.
Right.
Um,
One of the things I will point out, like with business is, and you have the same thing in here, because I had, some small businesses came to me, they're like, you know what, I just hire someone to do my website. I don't know if they're selling, what they're doing. And
Right.
so what we wrote in, and you guys have in there, is as long as you don't have actual knowledge that your vendor intended to violate the law, then you're not responsible, right? So if someone puts up an ad, I'll build you a free website if I can sell all the data. Yeah, okay, then you then you have actual knowledge, but otherwise, you wouldn't be responsible. And that gave some certainty. The other thing I had done was there was a lot of concern by restaurants. And so there were two main vendors for the websites of restaurants around us. And one of them is in Georgia, Pop Menu. And I had spoken with them. And at the time, they were making their websites that were compliant with California and Colorado, because they had passed already. And actually, maybe it was California, Virginia, and Colorado had passed. So I just asked them, would you charge our restaurants extra to make your websites compliant? They said, no, that's the way we build our websites now. So like initially when California happened, right, it was new. So it cost more to make things compliant, but now most people are building to that standard. And so,
okay, that's helpful because we are hearing that it was expected in California to comply. Do you see, like a small state like ours, do you see a potential consequence, foreseen or unforeseen consequence of doing the private right of action that we need to be thinking about?
I'm not, I think as long as you're playing within the box, right? Like of what the other states have done and moving some things, right? Like we've seen every state has moved something, right? Something that's important to them, so that it is able to comply. It's hard, for me to say, right? Like I think Connecticut's a small state as well, right? And so I do get concerned sometimes that if I pass a law, they're just going to say, you know what? We don't need you anymore. And that's why I try to work with other states on things. But I can't say necessarily with certainty what would happen. I know some places are different. I talked to someone, they were going to pass a law on their own that was way different than anything else. And they said, aren't you worried? They said, no, we don't worry about that. I'm like, okay. So I guess everyone is different in what they do. But that was Washington, D.C. I was talking to about something. That's the same population probably about as Vermont. So
That's right. Senator Harrison.
Yeah, thank you very much for speaking with us. So regarding the private right of action versus the AG or both, how do you measure the effectiveness of the legislation? Like over time, did you have maybe more complaints early on and you've settled those, or what sort of measurement do you have
Yeah,
going forward?
that's an excellent question and something that I think you need to build more into legislation, right? The cost benefit analysis. What are the benefits we're getting versus the costs we're creating? So the AG did do a report after the first year saying how many letters to cure they had sent, how many potential violations. The interesting thing is a lot of the reported violations they couldn't enforce because of the exemptions, right? They fell under one of the exemptions. So, but we only had them do that report for the first year, and so that is something that they did a great report, and I will share that with you because I think it is very instructive as well from their report.
Would you prefer that they keep doing that report or do it every 3 or 5 years, just because things are changing so much?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to resources, and I think
Right.
that it was initially we felt it was important to get that feedback, but um, I think it's just going to have to be to reach out to them when they have the information rather than requiring them to do so. Another thing, actually, that talking about the AD's office that reminded me that you guys did a good job of in your bill that I need to copy in future bills is requiring the outreach campaign on the data privacy. I thought that was a great addition that you
In
guys
the
did.
education, yeah, that whole section's
Yeah, we
good.
hope to beef that up. Yeah.
And then just another question on measuring, are there any business groups that are periodically letting you know how things are happening from their collective view?
No, no, I haven't necessarily. I mean, I've heard it's more on the facial rec issue. We've heard some things, but not necessarily. The one thing I'll tell you is when there was a professor from Yale who had written a study basically saying that when consumers feel more safe with how their data is being used, they're more likely to share that. And so I had reached out to him and came from, he put him on my task force. He also recommended a lot of good books for me to read regarding AI. But then his study came out like before Apple made the change to their privacy settings. And when you look at, Apple made it opt-in, right, for the sharing. And when you look at the opt-in rates, they're almost double in Europe of what they are in the US because they have the GDPR. They know how their data is being shared. So in the long term, trust is good for businesses, I think, and that people trust and understand how their data is being used. So.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Senator Brock.
Do you have a provision in your law relating to data brokers?
No, we did. I was gonna try to do that too, copy you guys on that. So, no, we haven't done that yet. So, but you guys, yeah, we borrowed from you on some of the AI stuff as well as I was going to try to do a form of your data broker law, but I was unable to get that done. Down here.
Okay.
My last question, jumping kind of from headline to headline, is this TurboTax question, sharing de-identified data for sale. I keep asking about different provisions of the bill, what happens with de-identified data? It has its own section, but should we put something specific in about tax information, or how do we get at these new problems?
Yeah. That is, yeah, I'd have to think through, right? I mean, that may be something that you could add to the definition of sensitive data, then it would need to have opt-in consent for the sale of that. That's a possible way to deal with that,
It's true.
other than the opt-out. And it's, as the compute power increases, right, the ability to re-identify data That's the thing we found, right? That the de-identified data isn't, it's supposed to be held in a form that it couldn't be, re-identified, but as we see with the increase in the compute power, anything is becoming possible, or could become possible in the future. So, but I haven't. I'm going to be honest. I haven't thought through that one that
Yeah.
much. So that was just a top of my head.
Yeah.
Just so, yeah, follow up on that question. This is Wendy Harris. Is there, or do you know if anyone's working on a standard that for de-identified data? Cause that seems like something that could be measured and. could be-
Yeah. That's a good
Standard.
question. I'm not. It would probably be NIST if someone is working on it, but I could. Is there a standard for de-identified?
It's not the other state really set that.
Well, we should be able, I mean, someone somewhere, I mean, we could do it and then charge people for. We need revenue. We're a really small state.
Yeah,
Yeah.
small. Gigantic compared to us. You measure your population in millions.
Yeah, we do have more. You have more land, but we have more people.
I have one more question that's kind of a wonky one. For us, it's page 39. It's subsection 9. It's a
Okay.
prohibition on the processor, so the kind of, person holding and managing the data, from combining personal data from the controller with personal data from the processor. This one might just be standard language. You might have seen this before, but I do worry that it is hard for a small business to meet this.
Can you say the page again? I'm sorry.
39 for us.
Okay.
It's line 15, right?
Yeah,
That one.
Isn't the threshold applied to this? Aren't the threshold applications? For business.
Respond.
You just have much. I'll have to story.
Adopt administrative. Must be governed by a contract. The contract must be valid, set forth. Mhm.
It's for number 9. On
But
page
it might
39,
be
it's number
numbers.
9.
There might be different numbers actually because we have different boards. So it says prohibit the processor from combining personal data.
Looking at this one too.
It's underneath an ABC list.
Okay, number 9, yeah. Some kind of personal data obtained from the controller of personal data that the processor is from or on behalf of another controller or person or yeah, I think that is I'll look in the Connecticut bill, but I think that language is the same.
Okay.
And what impact has that? I mean, we've lowered the threshold. Do we now have the lowest
Well,
threshold?
our threshold's 6,500. I
Right.
mean, we're a small state, but you're saying the lowest threshold otherwise is 35,000.
35,000 in Delaware, right? So
What's yours in Connecticut?
it's 100,000. So ours again was probably too high, but
Yeah,
if we adjusted it based on Colorado at 100,000, we should have been in the 60,000 to keep the same percentage of population. But it's
so
one of
this
those
is your language that we
negotiations. Everything in
Yeah.
the end.
So,
So
how
and that's
has-
the other thing that I'll say is like in working on it, this isn't a one-time bill, right? We're going to have to go fix it. We've discovered problems in ours. Other states have discovered problems and gone back. And it's just like, liquor is how many thousands of years old, but every year we're doing liquor laws in Connecticut and they cause big fights for whatever reason. But
Yes. No, what
and so, we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of good, right? You have a very good bill. If there are things that look, I always think everything can be better, right? Every race I ever ran in my life, I always thought I should have run faster. So I'm not saying it can't be better. And by saying it can be better doesn't mean it's bad, right? I think this is very good. You've done a good job of taking improvements that all the other states have made and added a few changes of your own.
Yeah.
But
But they did-
the policy decision, right, I'll just try to point out some of those that are going to be decisions that'll be specific to you, I think, on the, the
Yes.
private right of action and the, the exemption that would allow for the facial recognition. Those are things you may want, that you'll have to consider. And you also have a different process than we do, where you guys go to, if so in Connecticut, we have to pass the exact same bill out of both houses. We can't go, we don't go to, was it conference or I forget what he does.
Yeah, no, they have a really interesting, different process that we'll ultimately vet later. Senator Ferguson.
So I'm just curious, James, as we look at thresholds, because clearly that's one of our decision points here.
Right.
The lowest at the moment is Delaware. How is that working? And what would you, given your knowledge of a number of thresholds that you've seen around the country, clearly 100,000 is too many, is too big.
Right.
But what, the Goldilocks moment here, what is, 6,500 may be a little small. What's your thought?
Just saying Delaware has a population of 1 million and their threshold is 35,000.
Yeah.
So 6,500 is not proportional.
I got it.
I just wanted to check the population of Delaware.
Yeah. I could introduce you to Rep. Krista Griffith, who worked on the Delaware bill, if you want, so she could talk to you more about how it's gone down there. And that was, Montana was the first one who kind of lowered it, and then Delaware lowered it. We initially had tried to do it proportional to, taking what Colorado was 100,000 is proportionate to their population and lowering it. But again, as I mentioned, in a negotiation, we didn't get that. So
Proportional will be more like 25K.
Yeah, no, I that's what I'm trying to get at, is what are your thoughts about where that might land? And I think that might be.
That's wise.
Yeah, good. And my second question for you is, what part of your deliciously small state do you represent?
It's not that
Oh, I represent Milford, which is in between New Haven and Bridgeport. So
Yeah.
we have the most exits on I-95 of any city in Connecticut. So if you've driven 95 through Connecticut, you've been through my town. But I represent Milford, Orange, West Haven, and a small piece of Woodbridge. So New Haven area.
Maybe some of my ancestors in the cemetery you represent.
Oh, but what? So were they? What
I'm a
was?
beacher, and there are lots of beachers in the Woodbridge Cemetery.
Oh, Beechers, yeah, that's very. So Burwell is my grandmother's maiden name, so their word is ready, but they were
Residing together.
yeah. The Beechers are definitely a popular name around around the area.
Founders, yeah.
Oh, well, I think that's probably a lovely note to end on. It's been a interesting just to have.
Yeah, we just found out we're cousins.
And I mean, this is great to have this relationship with you because it seems like we do trade a lot of ideas back and forth without having known each other before. So
Yeah,
we're really grateful and we appreciate you and spending time with us.
Thank you, and thank you so much for your help, both here in the Senate and in the House, because I know
Exactly.
how helpful you've been for all of us. So thank you so much.
yeah. Thank you. And if I can help, please reach out, because again, I think I think it's important we work together. As Delegate Maldonado, this is a we problem. So happy to help whenever I can.
Great.
Enjoy the cherry blossoms. We're enjoying snow.
I can pass by. My mom's in Maine. I guess I should ask if she's having snow. That's the next text I'll send. So, all right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Great.
That was helpful.
It was helpful, really helpful. I'm so glad, and I'm glad you didn't feel we could clearer our picture of it.
I think he was free to speak.
Yes. Yeah, I hope Jeff Couture is our next witness.
Yes.
From Vermont Technology. Right.
Good morning.
Folks, we have a break at 10:45, so we have 4 more witnesses who will each have about And we're so.
Glad to be here. It's nice from
It's good to have you. Thank you for
Thanks
making the
being
effort.
here.
I think I've probably, or you've heard from me, or met some of you in the past, but just to introduce myself, I'm Jeff Kuchar. I'm the Executive Director of a business association called the Vermont Technology Alliance. And our mission is to support and tech-focused businesses and tech jobs in Vermont. We have that ranges from individuals to very large companies. Most of our members are small to medium businesses, and they make up the core of our.
How many businesses do you?
Oh, about over 200 in our organization. So, and I would say those businesses do support, data privacy regulations and laws, and I think most of them, some of them I deal with, go through the effort to make sure that they're operating in a way that protects data of their customers. Our concern is with the inclusion of the private right to action, which I know you're debating, discussing. I'm concerned, and our organization is concerned that, allowing the private right to action could potentially open this enormous box of gotcha legislation based on, that could overwhelm, small to medium-sized businesses in Vermont. It's understandable to, want to provide that opportunity for citizens to make sure they get heard or can deal with problems. But we think instead it's going to potentially open a path to litigation. Litigation designed to extract a settlement from small and medium-sized businesses. And we had a little bit of this, like when we went through the whole issue with patent trolls years ago, where there'd be an effort about, you had a printer and that had a patent in it.
Yeah.
And all they had to do was send a letter or a notice, and many businesses would end up just settling for that. The concern with the bill is that there's a really long list of things that businesses have to do. And if they misstate something, they could potentially get one of these attempts to extract a settlement from them. I have a note here in the list. It would include, ensuring the data privacy policy is understood by all users. Define. Keep records of information, request to delete information, I should say. Provide a copy of personal data in a portable and readily usable format. Provide clear and conspicuous opt-out rights. Establish a conspicuously available appeal process, and many others. You could, depending on how you put this on your website, you could argue with this not conspicuously available, or it's not clear. So, we're going to challenge you on this and make sure that you go ahead and pay up for not doing what you should.
May I just answer a question?
Sure.
So, Jeff, on conspicuous, if we set a standard for the size and type, which we did in our data broker bill, Randy and I, we worked very hard on in terms of size of font and all that stuff. Would it help to be more prescriptive on that?
I would think so.
So
It would include some.
so that might be
That
something.
might be a
Or
good
example.
reason to push the PRA effective date out and require that guidance is available before it's put into effect.
Yeah, bottom line, I don't think we need a PRA to
Right,
get
yeah.
what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But yes, obviously, because of all the details, and not just a few that I listed, that you have to make sure you do. You gotta make sure processors are doing, what they said they're going to do.
Yes.
A lot of times you're working with a third-party processor. You don't know what exactly they're doing with that, or to get that information from them. So then it becomes a very expensive proposition. They have the business have to invest a lot of money.
And you would say, even if we have the knowingly standard in there, they could face a settlement that related to that.
Yes,
That they should have known or they should
well,
have.
so we do have a 60-day cure. That's good.
I think that's a big plus for that.
It is, except probably the way this would work. I'm gonna get a letter saying I'm in violation. You have 60 days to fix it. I have that hanging over my head. Maybe I'm gonna go through a number of things. Maybe they're gonna push for things. It creates a very challenging atmosphere for businesses to have to deal with that. Particularly smaller businesses that don't have the resources or the legal expertise. And even if you make that correction, if you're trying to get a settlement, you may say, well, you didn't really do it the right way. You know, you should have done it this way.
Senator Brock.
Well, is there also the possibility that in order to make the correction, you're going to do some sort of a systems or software change
Yes.
to do it?
Right.
And when I try to get a plumber, it's probably the same way you're trying to get a software engineer to fix my website so that it doesn't have something that's in violation. What period of time is reasonable for small businesses to be able to respond to things that require system changes?
Well, it might be more than 60 days. Look, granted, there may be a simple thing that you have my name somewhere, I know you, and you have to
Right.
remove it. Although the way this works, I can go to any business and I can say, do you have my info, or if I've dealt with you, do you have my information? What have you done with it? Who have you given it to? Did you give it to somebody else? Can you prove that to me? Do you have a record of what I did? And in that case, you can get lost. But yes, if there's if say the notice is incorrect or something's wrong with the site, you're not doing it the right way, it's not clearly understood, then yeah, you gotta go through some changes that could take a while. All the while potentially with a lawsuit hanging over your head or a settlement, so say, hey, look, you pay us off, this will go away. But you have to fix this.
Are you satisfied in terms of the opt-out? That you have a right and some exceptions regarding protection, security, and so on. If you maintain a record of people who shoplifted from your stores, you've got 3 stores, and someone requests to opt out, do you understand what you can and cannot do?
I don't know that example. I don't know if that's one that you can opt out of this, you have that kind of, I assume you could. I assume that if you're keeping that data, it's my data, you could.
I could.
Except in it, there's probably some, I don't know all the deep, there's so much in this bill. There's probably a
Yeah.
different example if you're dealing with a criminal situation or a police thing, there's probably some example.
Right, we have another group requesting a change because they manage back-end retail theft for businesses, so they will say, hey, this person keeps returning things from your store, like the day later, let's, look into this a little bit more. Yeah.
Prom dresses 2 days after the prom.
Oh, interesting, that's
But
probably,
that's
I'm
always
only
a
catch.
catch.
Yeah,
That has always
been.
I'm sorry, that has always been a problem.
Senator Clarkson.
So do all 200 of your companies have privacy policies and data privacy policies?
I don't know, but I haven't looked at all of them. I suspect most do. And our organization does, but I don't know whether it's gonna meet the requirements of this law, for example. But.
So if most of them already have something, this shouldn't be too much of a.
Depending if it meets all the requirements that are spelled out here.
And many of them probably operate in other states where they're already compatible with their data privacy laws.
Right, some
Right.
are. So I have some.
But ours are
the-
different.
The larger members who, for working in other
Yeah.
states. Are trying to figure out all of this. I mean, this goes back to, the idea of interoperability,
Exactly.
particularly, between
Yeah.
states, right, the house, but. Some of the smaller ones, they don't. Some of the larger ones that have dealt with this have spent thousands of dollars on trying to
Yes.
make sure they have the right setup. I think for smaller. And I'm here really not only because of our members, but I think I can see other small businesses.
Yeah.
that might be- For many of our businesses, they'll have 10 or so employees. I don't know. I would say our members are maybe more astute at dealing with this, but whether they're as up to date as they should be. I had a call as I've talked about this with our members from somebody who does websites. He says, I'm really panicked because I'm trying to help all my customers with websites. All of them have different formats. I'm not sure if we've done the right thing. I'm trying to look at third parties that can do. So they're working through this. So it's not an easy process.
No, I think it'd be helpful though for us, because your membership isn't that big that you couldn't find out. It would be interesting for us to know how many of them have, privacy policies and how many, actively work. Because I think something compelling that James talked about is trust and that consumers trust companies that are better at protecting their data.
Right.
So I would think every business actually would want to support this work. And because it builds trust and I'm gonna use a website or a company that protects me more than another company. So I mean, I think it's in their own self-interest.
Well, I think you're hearing them say they don't mind data privacy laws.
Right.
It's
We just
how
don't want
much
to
they're
try to
doing
be
new
sued if
things
they-
in Vermont that they're not doing in New Hampshire.
I'm concerned about those, you're not following, there's an inadvertent action that happens, maybe you don't return the data to someone in a timely manner, and the reason businesses, I think, have gotten concerned over the potential of private right to actions, you look at what happened in Illinois. Illinois is a specific case, there's a biometric,
Right.
a Biometric Information Privacy Act. But since then, and there have been some legitimate legal cases that have happened in Illinois based around, abuses or the wrong use of biometric data, biometric information. But and some notes here, a coalition of business organizations in Illinois have identified more than 1,500 frivolous lawsuits filed by class action lawyers against manufacturers, retailers, hospitals, nursing homes, hotels, and other businesses. These have claimed a violation of employer consumer rights, even though there have been no harm to individuals, theft of identities, or nefarious intent. So right now, you could, under the way it's written, you could sue because you did not do some aspect of the law
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
And you could ask for settlement. And many businesses will just say, I'm gonna pay the settlement before I go through this because it's intimidating to get a legal action.
Oh,
And there are firms that are going to jump on this. They're waiting for something like this to be able to go after that. That's my concern. And I don't want our Vermont businesses to have to.
Yeah, and we'll look more closely at Illinois,
Well-
because I think that's really important with the states that have put in a private right of action, what has happened.
So on that, because I know that's a concern, I mean,
Right.
that would be a concern, I think we're gonna hear that from the Vermont Country Store. If we set a level of frivolous, I mean, in other areas, we have set a threshold for frivolous.
Right,
That it strikes me that would be a way for us to.
we can also remove class action lawsuits.
Yeah.
Well, it's the eye of the beholder. So you'll hear from others, right? We believe, and much like in Connecticut, that this should be handled by the Attorney General's office. I mean, they're the best prepared to understand, the ability to respond and understand what's a legitimate, serious, violation versus something that's inadvertent or minor.
Right, it would gum up our courts to have to decide what's frivolous or not.
No, we can set a standard.
Our business
frivolous.
one.
And it
They
appears
started
that it's
to look
been
at that.
working, and I hasn't given you a report, but so far, having listened in Connecticut, I didn't go through the Attorney General's office. At the very least, if at the very least, we could add it. Let this bill, let a version of the bill, I think there's a lot in here, a lot of things that need fixing, go through without private right of action. If it becomes a problem, if the Attorney General says, and I think our report is required, this is just too many cases, we're seeing too many violations, Vermonters are being harmed, we need to have this in. They'll provide a report to you and know this. I don't think that's going to be the case. And I'm trying, I'm hoping we can avoid. I'd rather have it go that way, say, look, there's a problem versus I have to come back, we have to come back and get you to change it because we're seeing a lot of lawsuits. and so
Right.
forth.
Let's say we set a higher threshold of harm and number of people involved specifically for the PRA section. What is a medium size? I mean, the problem with the data is it could still involve 1 million people's data, even if they're like a 2-person shop in
Right.
Hula,
Right, I don't,
it's really hard to say what harm threshold. would be.
yeah, and it's unique to each individual, so I
Yeah.
get.
Yeah,
Point this last, look, I think you have information that I don't want you to have. I have a right to have you believe in me. And I think most businesses, if given enough time
yeah,
and given the right kind of, can do that or will do that. But whether they'll be able to do it all the time, or completely, or efficiently,
right.
or whatever.
I think it would be good to hear from your website guy, because we often don't listen enough to how this would functionally roll out and how challenging it is with the workforce level that we have. So if we could get,
Yeah,
I mean, obviously he has to agree,
Right,
but I
absolutely.
think we're nice people. So.
I believe what he's trying to do, and they're trying to find third party organizations that
Yeah.
offer this,
If
but
if he's comfortable talking, it helps us to know the cost of that, the, the delays.
he's not sure if what they're gonna, whatever you get set up using a third party is gonna meet the requirements. of the-
Right, I mean, what we're running into, which is, in my mind, extremely fair, is a lot of businesses don't wanna come forward and say, I think I'm gonna have a hard time meeting this, that's, it's very exposing to them to do that, and they shouldn't be, they shouldn't be treated like that's because they're doing something bad.
Yeah, and they don't have the wherewithal or concern inside of me, and that's why they have folks like me.
Yeah,
That's why I'm here
yeah,
for representing
right,
our
exactly,
organization, trying to say, from what I'm hearing, it could be a challenge.
Yeah,
I mean, so, yes, data privacy is good. Yes, we should have some legislation. I'm not sure if there's a lot in this one.
yeah,
I mean, if I were to pick it, I'd prefer the one that's 269, whatever that came out of this committee.
yeah.
But that's not an either or. It's
Well-
an and. I mean, the
Well,
kids
I-
code is a,
That test 269 isn't kids.
oh,
No,
it's,
they-
It was
our
the
data.
companion
Yeah.
You had a day- there was a
Right,
data
no,
privacy
right,
bill
right,
that's initiated out of this committee that was closer to, I
Right,
think,
because they started it, so it's an H bill.
Right.
And we did kids code.
it just was.
Yeah.
But, so yes, data privacy, we understand there's gonna be some regulation. Let's keep it consistent. What's happened, the Connecticut model seems to work for most businesses. I wouldn't call it a business friendly legislation per se, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is something that businesses can manage. That's why he hasn't heard any complaints, because
Great.
it's able to manage and there's not a threat of legal action. I think anything that comes out of that's closer to that model is probably gonna be
Right.
able to be managed and accepted.
Yeah, I wanna give people relatively equal time, so we should move on.
Yeah.
Just one
Yeah.
quick question, and so you probably have businesses that would be considered controllers and businesses that would be considered
Processors.
the processors.
Probably.
Because it'd be interesting
I
to
know.
hear from
Yeah,
someone in each of those
it
categories.
would if they're willing to.
All right.
And the definitions might capture people we didn't mean to capture, so
Right.
getting more detail from your businesses would.
I know one of our business members, with Robbie Adler with Faraday, but
Okay, yeah,
Interested in
Faraday,
finding
great,
out.
and I know I think he's a supporter of kids code, so that's,
right.
they wanna be helpful. I will say this. The House Commerce Committee did do a great job looking at other states, talking to, other states about what they've done and not done. They did not hear from small businesses. They told us that themselves.
Yes, which is frustrating,
So we really have to dig into this piece and listen to how Vermont businesses where we have more control and more oversight will be harmed at the expense of some international business that could keep, stealing people's information. So we're gonna be digging into the small business impact here.
Yeah, which
And
may not all be
specifically
copies.
controllers
Yes,
and
and
processors, so that we know.
Well, and our job in this committee is to balance economic development and our business needs with consumer
That's
protection.
right, yeah,
And our,
but the
that
balance
is,
has to exist.
Yes,
That
I
is
do not
valid.
want to discourage business from coming here by making us the only state. I also would like a definition or a discussion about what is harm,
Yes, we have to tighten the definition of
Yeah,
harm, one
and I'm-
100%.
not clear.
Yeah.
And are people being massively harmed now
Right.
or
what we
is
heard,
this
Yeah.
proactive?
It looks like even the two other states that have a PRA have a tighter definition of what harm
Yes.
occurred and you can't seek in a judgment.
Right, I mean, in Illinois, it's totally around biometric.
Yeah.
It's not
Right.
broad.
Right.
I think that maybe California has something to do with health information.
Washington is health information.
Okay.
but there could
One of
be
the-
economic,
Well,
there's a whole
okay.
range.
But-
We're
but-
not
but-
arguing for witnesses.
And that's the reason why there's not a PRA in a lot of states, but
Yes,
again, reiterate, I would like to not have that in whatever
Sure.
bill comes out of this,
Yeah.
and I think if we felt to get to that point, we
Yeah.
needed it, that's something that could be amended or added to.
right. We
All
usually
are-
we're having both conversations and Dylan's been great at being present and working through all of that. So we appreciate
Yeah,
you
thank you.
turning in
Thank
and
you for,
having you stay for the witnesses and answer
Yes,
questions
thank
at the break. Megan Sullivan, hope you're faring well in the weather. It's probably good to be.
Yeah, I am so sorry that I am not in person there with you all. We've had lots of cars off the road in our area and kids home from school. So also hoping we don't have having the COVID fear of children running behind me. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
You're
Oh,
fine.
okay. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak about this bill. For the record, Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. And I want to be really clear up front that we are supportive of comprehensive data privacy reform in Vermont. We started this session this year really hopeful that we could be fully supportive of H21, 121, and we're still hopeful that we can get there. That said, ideally, data privacy would be something handled at the federal level, as data and digital services don't operate within the confines of the state's physical boundaries. But as we continue to see the federal government fail to act on this, we understand and support the state's need to step up to the plate here. So thank you for taking the time to do this. Since first commenting on H121 last session, we asked if 3 things could happen. The first, that Vermont's data privacy law be regionally compatible. Second, that the Attorney General be supported and empowered as the enforcement officer, and that the specific private right of action be removed. And lastly, that there's a robust education plan, including Vermont's trusted technical assistance providers. I think these 3 asks point to the business community that is not saying, let us self-regulate, but that we're ready to participate in the process. We've seen H21, 121 move further away from being compatible regionally, though, with some untested and confusing definitions, the continued private right of action, and lack of actionable education plan. We have serious concerns that we may be moving in a way that will catch businesses getting it wrong to the benefit of litigators, rather than moving them to get it right to the benefit of consumers. When it's said we want to pave the way and be trailblazing, inspiring the federal government to act, we need to be clear that doing that could happen at the expense of Vermont businesses. How these new definitions could be interpreted will be done through litigation, and with a threshold of 6,500 customers, by far the lowest in the country, those businesses could be any independent restaurant or retailer that is trying to compete with targeted advertising. We're asking that we think about this not in terms of how we can lead the charge to DC, but instead how we can show DC that in their failure to act, states will join together, making robust consumer protection laws that bring businesses along while holding bad actors accountable. I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking about, these 3 points. The Information Technology and Innovation Foundation estimated, in the absence of Congress passing federal privacy legislation, a patchwork approach of state privacy laws would have a substantial financial impact, with U.S. small businesses bearing $20 to $23 billion cost annually. Connecticut, as you heard this morning, has a data privacy law that many states, including New Hampshire, are modeling their laws after, and we are asking that that happen in Vermont. Connecticut is not considered an industry law. That is not why you see support for it from the business community. If we wanted an industry law, we'd be pointing to Virginia. Connecticut puts consumer protections first, but does so using definitions that are tested with a cure period, but not a private right of action. While much of 121 is interoperable with Connecticut's model, there are key differences that changed, making the bill one that is less compatible now than it was before. The definitions of biometric data, precise geolocation data, sale of personal data, targeting, advertising, loyalty programs, and data minimization have moved away from Connecticut, both in definition and how they interact with each other. I think the Retail Grocers Association may have more on these differences in their testimony. H121 is also an outlier in the number of consumers it takes to be included under this bill. The proposed 6,500 is considerably lower, as you heard before, than any other state. New Hampshire, which passes data privacy law, has a threshold of 35,000. I want to give you an example of a business that would be included in this. We have a small independent restaurant member in Ludlow, Vermont. They serve around 150 covers daily with reservations through Resy. That means about 36,000 covers a year, factoring that they are closed 2 days a week and probably around 3 weeks a year. Vermont's tourism industry has 30% local traffic, so removing 70% of those covers that may be from out of state, that small independent restaurant from their reservation platform alone would be over the threshold in this bill. So while provisions such as the data protection assessment may be included in other states, that and other requirements required in this bill will be pressed on much smaller businesses, requiring they hire vendors and consultants, or in the fear of non-compliance, shut down their digital presence. On the private right of action, the introduction of a specific private right of action for data privacy violation risks ushering in a new era of litigiousness in our state we're ill-prepared to absorb. While well-intentioned in its aim to protect consumer rights, experience from other jurisdictions with much more limited PRAs tells a cautionary tale. Such provisions invariably lead to a surge in litigation, placing undue strains on businesses of all sizes. While the story of the individual whose complaint is too small to be taken up by the AG is empowered to stand up for their rights may be the intent here, for those of us working with businesses 15 years ago through the nightmare of patent trolls, we've seen a prime example of how trial attorneys can and will turn this into an opportunity for settlements from businesses that know the costs and time in court, regardless of the outcome, will far outweigh the ransom fee of just going away. Empowering and supporting the Attorney General to go after the bad actors and fully enforce offers a more direct and efficient path in protecting consumer interests without the consequences that come from more broadly including a private right of action. As to the right to cure, while the Attorney General will undoubtedly take a reasonable review of this, a trial lawyer seeking a settlement is less likely to agree that deleting data from future use will satisfy the legal charge of past harm. And in terms of education, a report done in 2019 by the California Attorney General estimated that compliance with their data privacy law will cost a small business around $50,000 annually, a mid-sized business $50,000 initially, and a mid-sized business around $100,000 initially. This does not include ongoing compliance costs. These costs can greatly decrease or increase depending on the interoperability with other states. If we want costs to compliance to be reasonable, interoperability once again is critical. But it is not only the cost that is of concern. It is how businesses are supposed to understand and navigate these complex requirements. In this bill, ACCD and the Attorney General are being tasked with providing this education and compliance information to businesses. While I greatly admire the myriad of tasks ACC does as the smallest state agency, they are not a technical assistance provider, nor do they have expertise in data privacy. And the Attorney General is the top law enforcement agency in Vermont, and not a place where businesses are going to go to understand and ask questions about compliance. ACCD never testified about their ability to do this work, and I don't believe we're asked about their capacity to do it. Last year, I recommended the committee reach out to Vermont Professional of Colors Network, the Small Business Development Center, and Center for Women Enterprise as trusted providers to understand how to best engage with all businesses, but especially those that are marginalized. I brought this up again in my testimony prior to crossover and ended up doing that outreach myself. Through these conversations with these business leaders, I found my way to Nicole Killeran, the director of the Vermont Small Business Law Center and Small Business Law Clinic. Nicole has staff with deep knowledge about data privacy and breach requirements nationwide and in Vermont.
And just to know, she's at Vermont Law Graduate School. That's why her name
Yeah.
sounds familiar. She's done
Oh,
like,
good work through there.
yes,
On that little project.
I just want to know that.
We're intimately aware of it.
So Nicole told me in an email, imposing more complicated regulatory requirements might be justified. But enforcement without good information for compliance just make businesses who are aware fearful. If the legislature's desire is to make sure businesses take steps to protect consumers' private information from fraud and scams, then it should fund efforts to teach businesses how to comply. I highly recommend the committee hear directly from Nicole and her staff about their experience working with businesses on data privacy compliance and how to best provide education and outreach that will be needed here from trusted technical service
And
providers.
Megan, can you do us a favor and just make that link with Magali since
Yes.
she's not here and I can't just turn around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So again, I just want to say that we appreciate and are supportive of passing comprehensive data privacy law this year and hope that we can work with the committee to make some of these reasonable changes. That is the end of my prepared testimony, and I'm happy to talk through any questions that you have.
Take maybe a couple of questions.
Just a couple, hi Megan, it's Wendy, or Senators.
It's like whatever you want.
What, how many businesses in Vermont operate outside of Vermont? You know, have an online presence, I would think it's most of them.
I would think.
Absolutely.
I mean,
most
they
of
also
them.
have tourists coming here
Right.
if they're bricks and mortar, so.
But even the bricks, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, even the bricks and mortar, I think having a digital presence is something that we really encouraged. We being, sort of the business support community, especially during COVID, when we saw bricks and mortar stores shut down. Businesses had to pivot and were forced to enter a digital marketplace, whether or not they wanted to. And so we've seen a great deal of businesses increase their online digital presence, especially in the
so-
last 3 to 4 years.
Well, and then I just add, they are using targeted advertising to get people to come to their little store in our little towns. And, like targeted ads have really changed the game. And no one here has opposed our bill on kids, which is a very different story than targeted ads that reach adult populations who are making decisions about where to spend their money.
Right, and I just wanna understand, how do businesses determine which state's privacy laws to abide by? I mean, I would think, do you recommend they go to the most strict, just to make sure that they're in compliance with all of them?
I think those
Or-
are really good questions for Nicole because she does data privacy training for businesses. In looking at, what is your reach? What laws are you complying with? And again, it's the interoperability with other states. If we are doing what other states are doing, then it's a much easier plug and play in how to do this. If we are creating new requirements and new definitions, it's a much harder path to navigate that takes a more specialized approach.
Yeah,
And I think you'll
hear
see
you.
some businesses
Yeah.
who say, we'll go with the most strict state and put that in place for everything. And some that say, we're gonna look at what each state does and tailor our business. It's gonna depend on the size, the type of business.
Okay,
I think.
and then just
Fine,
one
yeah.
follow-up, which if you can send us specific businesses that would be processors. Because I suspect that the end business would have consultants or vendors, and those vendors would be responsible for figuring out the compliance. I mean, that's how it usually works. So do we have, I would like to know if we have processors in Vermont. I'm sure we have a few, but
We must.
that would be helpful.
All right, I'll see what I can find.
Thanks.
So
Thank you,
regulating people we don't have.
No, we'll find out.
Thank you, Megan. Jill Fenning from Vermont Gas. Hello.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think so.
That's James.
James Hall is
Great.
next. Oh, did you hear him already?
No, it's up top.
Oh, he's up top, okay. Oh, please.
We're ready. Sorry.
Good morning. Great. No problem. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for allowing me to join by Zoom as well in the midst of this April storm. My name is Jill Fenning. I am the VP of, what's that?
April's the
Anyway.
coolest month.
There's a delay. Carry on.
Thanks. My name is Jill Fenning. I'm the VP of Regulatory and General Counsel at Vermont Gas Systems, or VGS. And as an aside, because the law school was just being talked about, I'm an alumna of Vermont Law and Graduate School, and I currently serve on the board of the law school.
That's
Yeah.
right.
This is great.
And I believe that Senator Clarkson's husband was my property professor, so.
I think he probably, good. Then at least we know the bar.
So thank you for having me. VGS, as I think you know, is a fully regulated utility, and we provide energy to about 55,000 customers in Addison, Chittenden, and Franklin counties. I first just want to say that protecting the privacy of customer data is one of VGS's highest priorities. We agree with the overall intent of H121 to protect consumer data, and we appreciate the work of the House and this committee in developing and reviewing this comprehensive data legislation. As a utility regulated by the Public Utility Commission and the Department of Public Service, our posture as it relates to H121 is a bit different from the other companies that would be regulated under this bill. This issue was raised in a letter that we and other public utilities sent to the committee last week. There are principally two reasons why we believe that an exemption for utilities like us would be appropriate here. First, we are already fully regulated by the Commission and the department, including on matters of data privacy and security. And second, the customer data that we collect and use is for the sole purpose of providing utility service to customers that they have requested from us. I'll talk a little bit about each of these points in a little more detail. First, we're fully regulated by the Commission and the department, including on matters of cybersecurity and customer service quality. Because of that, we would prefer to avoid conflicting regulatory schemes where regulations under H121 might be different from what our own commission and department might require. Let me explain this a little bit more. First, the commission has plenary authority over all aspects of our business under Title 30. This was evidenced in the cybersecurity principles that came out of docket 7307, which were driven by concerns about ratepayer privacy around ratepayer information. Although VGS was not party to that docket, we have voluntarily opted in to be part of the ongoing cybersecurity work coming out of that docket, which requires, among other things, utilities to maintain a cybersecurity program, collaborate in information sharing, and report annually to the department on issues around cybersecurity. Second, to the extent that a consumer had concerns about VGS's handling or use of their personal data, utility customers have a direct line to the department's Consumer Affairs and Public Information Division. Third, I also just note that we are one of the state's 3 energy efficiency utilities, and the commission requires that EEUs utilize a confidential information management system for holding customer data under the process and administration document relating to the EEU's orders of appointment. And then lastly, on this point, as was mentioned in the letter to the committee, other states have exempted utilities from their data privacy laws, including Colorado, Indiana, Tennessee, and Texas. In the case of Indiana, their legislature decision to exempt public utilities was based on the fact that their utilities are already fully regulated, including on matters of data retention and security, just as here in Vermont. The second reason why an exemption would be appropriate here is that the personal data that we collect and use is for the sole purpose of providing utility service to customers that they have asked us to provide, and in some cases to ensure safe and reliable service. As I noted earlier, VGS takes the confidentiality and privacy of customer information as a top priority. We currently have a privacy policy that's posted on our website that details what types of information we collect and how we use that information. Generally, we collect name, address, contact information in order to provide service to customers. We already utilize good practices as it relates to data minimization and data handling. We collect only what we need to provide service to customers. I'll also note that some personal data that we hold is necessary to retain for safety records, such as the service cards that detail the history of installation of gas service at a given premises. That and other service maintenance records are important for ensuring safety for the service that we provide to customers. We do not sell consumer personal data, and we only share personal data with service providers who assist us in providing service to customers, or with other utilities or EEUs under data sharing agreements that prioritize confidentiality and data privacy. And as it relates to service providers that we use, we ensure that our agreements with those providers have appropriate data privacy and data security protections. Because the limited personal data that we collect is necessary for us to provide service to customers, if we were to receive a deletion request from a customer, we would not be able to fulfill that request and also continue to provide them service. As I mentioned, the data that we hold is for purposes of providing utility gas service, as well as other services such as energy efficiency audits and gas and electrification equipment sales, leasing, and servicing. Other states, such as California, have included in their deletion request protocol the ability for a data controller to reject a deletion request to the extent that's necessary for the business to hold information in order to provide a good or service that has been requested by the customer. We believe such a provision could be incorporated into the Vermont bill and would support successful implementation of the legislation's goal to protect personal data. In conclusion, we would ask this committee to consider exempting regulated utilities like BGS from H121. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have, and thank you again for having me here today.
Thank you, Jill. Senator Clarkson.
Jill, thanks so much. Did you explore this option with the House committee? Was this discussed in House Commerce?
I believe that it was not raised until the letter that was sent, I believe, last week to both committees.
So
Dylan was probably here for.
Yeah, I could just jump in. Dylan Zwicky with Leon Public Affairs on behalf of PGS. We also represent Green Mountain Power. We did submit this request. It was not a formal citizen witness chair request. The committee chose not to introduce it. Admittedly, we probably could have sat in the chair and done what Jill has done. They did submit a letter that went to this committee and to the House Commerce Committee. It was relatively late in the process.
So late in the process, so I assume they assume we deal with it here. Got it, thanks.
While you're here, Jill,
I just had a second part. So Jill, I appreciate that you collect limited data, and I appreciate that you're required. And in other bills that we've worked on, we're definitely fans of eliminating duplications in regulatory matters and duplicity. We're not talking about duplicity. I just wanted to ask, do you collect banking data? Because I assume some customers have auto pay. So I assume you also collect banking information.
That's a great question. So we VGS do not hold that information. Our customers can sign up online through a platform called MyMeter that we utilize as one of our service providers, and they have the ability to set up automatic payment of their bills, including by providing account information. Not to get too technical, but there's another service provider layered on top of that, who is the service provider that actually holds the financial information. This is how a lot of online payment works, and that additional service provider is the one that has to be PCI and DSS compliant for the banking information. So in sum, we do collect that information through our service providers, but we do not hold any of that. We VGS do not hold any of that information ourselves.
Okay, thanks.
This feels like an easy one. Does anyone have a problem with exempting entities already regulated under XYZ? We will figure out the language. I think that would probably be, and Jill, you're the lawyer, you can send us language if you haven't already. The cleanest way, I think, would be to say, if you're subject to these other regulations that you've mentioned, you're exempt from this bill. I do appreciate the suggestion about rejecting deletion. I think that would help take care of some cases that we don't have a lobbyist coming in and telling us about. Because when we have heard about requests for deletion that cannot be completed, or it would allow criminal activity for that to be completed, I think it's been a warranted look at exemptions. So I'd rather just have a curing for the deletion as well.
Yeah, just a comment on
Yeah.
the deletion. What I understood was they can't delete the data and continue to provide service. That makes a lot of
Right,
sense.
that's what she said.
But if somebody does terminate service, I would hope that their
Right.
data and historical data
Would be deleted.
could be deleted, would be deleted.
We can look at how the language is written, but I would see that to be,
Okay, and
I'm
And
sure
just-
California figured that out.
yeah, and I'm looking at their website and the so I understand why you would have multiple processors in this case, and businesses have had those for a while just to keep the data separate. So I think that the privacy to the customer should include the information that's held by your processors on your behalf.
Mhm.
Would just be, so like banking
That's your-
information
that's
is
your
not.
word.
But
They're
also
regulated by
They're
the
regulated.
other.
No, I understand, but just
entity.
to be complete, so I mean, for
Yeah.
customers to know what information is being collected, it's also being collected
Mhm.
on VGS behalf.
Yeah,
by
I think
their,
you're getting at something that's important, which is people need to appreciate that it isn't just VGS that's collecting the data. It's all these other entities that work with VGS to process the entire account.
Right.
right,
I
So-
can imagine if they're paying
Yeah.
the credit, that they are aware of that, but I mean, I think it's
You
probably,
go to Cumberland Farms, you get a card, it's a direct withdrawal from your bank account. And I think all the gas companies, or many of them, are offering that now.
oh, you mean a cash card?
Okay, well, it's a direct withdrawal, you get a 10-cent discount because they're not paying the fees for the
Right.
credit companies. I have no idea who's managing that.
Is that a debit card? I mean, does it have,
Yeah.
it does have a number on
it's
it?
a
my
loyalty
smart
card, I
pay.
think it's a
Yeah.
loyalty.
Right, oh,
Smart
but,
pay.
okay, but you can't use that to pay VGS.
No, but I
Okay,
can't use it, it
Okay,
only works
Okay.
for Cumberland Farms.
we're gonna end this
Yes.
conversation.
but thank you, this is
Yeah.
very helpful.
I'm not seeing, any disagreement with those two provisions, getting language in.
And I think we just need to get language from
Yeah,
Jill.
so Jill, with Dylan, if you can get us that language. I'm sure you emailed it to us, but we need like a piece of paper and a reminder of all things, so.
I think
Thank
we
you.
also, though, in general, ought to think a little bit about deletion of information involving customers generally who are no longer customers. Because there may be valid reasons to maintain that. If, for example, there are other potential litigation, collection issues.
Right.
Insurance issues, if there's a
There's all
fire.
kinds
Yeah.
of things, taxes that
Right,
may require you to maintain.
I know.
And so I don't think we want to,
It goes on your credit record. If you delete it, the fact that you paid your oil bill for 20 years is gone.
well, unless you follow the deletion to the credit bureau, and then you're back in the data broker business again.
Let's get, if we wanna keep the deletion provision, let's get a California expert
We'd like
in
to
to
take a
talk
look
about all their
before we-
exemptions.
How can
Yeah.
you
Move
mention
to
Vermont is not California.
Well, listen,
California.
as a native of California, I
California
completely
all
agree. I do
year.
not, California is not the gold standard for any law.
No, it wasn't, it was another.
But
Okay.
we at least need to, I'm sure they thought about a lot of exemptions
Right.
and a lot of concerns, and so we need to understand the deletion
Actually,
section
another
of the
question,
center.
James, just why didn't Connecticut, I mean, if that, yeah.
Speaking of James, let's get him on. Thank you, Jill. We'll be in touch.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate
Thanks.
you with us. And James, we want to give you some full time. Oh, James, what did you
Jim.
say?
No, I was thinking James Maroney, not Jim Paul.
Oh,
About the
okay.
utilities by Connecticut.
Oh my
because
gosh.
I think
Okay, well,
Jill,
let's go to our next witness.
Yeah.
Mr. Hall,
that's that James up there.
hello, and we will give you a little 5 minutes into our break so that you have equal time. So we'll break at 10:50. Not sure if you can hear us.
We can't see you. Jim,
I'm just gonna.
there he
There
is.
he is. It's been patient for all this time, so. Hi.
Good morning.
Sorry
It's
about
good
that.
to-
I use Teams, not Zoom. So,
We're the opposite. I really can't do Teams.
thank you for having me.
More secure though.
That's true.
Yeah, I guess. Did you hear us introduce ourselves, Jim?
I did. Thank you.
You didn't.
Oh,
You weren't
he
here.
heard, and then there's Senator Cummings is here too.
I'm Senator Ann Cummings, and I represent Washington District, which is right here.
And Jim, she, like me, is one of the 29 million that get your catalog.
Oh,
Wonderful.
It got cut way down.
Let's turn it over
now
to
I-
you so that, because you've been really patient, so let's hear your
So-
comments.
I'd like to thank you all for having me today, and I apologize for not getting my material in ahead of time. I was drafting it this morning. So again, my name is Jim Hall. I'm the president and CEO of the Vermont Country Store. I'm the board chair and member of the board privacy committee of the American Commerce Marketing Association, also known as the ACMA. The
Oh,
ACMA
great.
is a national alliance advocating for the best interest of remote sellers and their suppliers, most of whom are small businesses. I've worked at the Vermont Country Store for 12 years and for 9 years as CEO. Prior to that, I spent 27 years at LL Bean, working my way up to a senior leadership role in marketing and in finance. We strongly support consumer privacy. I've been working for years in Washington, D.C., advocating for a national privacy law. Without exception, every business leader and most members of Congress agree that we need a national standard, but no one can agree on what that standard should be. As a result, we have an unworkable hodgepodge of state laws that will inevitably result in small to mid-sized businesses unknowingly failing to comply with some states' requirements. This is not a problem for the behemoths like Amazon, Walmart, and Target. They have whole departments that deal with these laws and regulations. Small businesses do not have that. For example, at VCS, we don't have a legal department. And although I am not an attorney, I am tasked with trying to monitor and ensure that our business complies with the tangled web of state privacy laws. I'm extremely concerned about certain provisions of H121 and the threat they pose to small businesses, including businesses in Vermont. First, the jurisdictional threshold of 6,500 residents is very low. This means that every business in the United States must keep track of how many customers they have in every state, not just Vermont, and 6,500 is a very small number. There should be no right of private action. This is a windfall for unscrupulous lawyers seeking to prey on small businesses. In 2013, the Vermont Country Store fell victim to a private right of action provision in the state of California's labeling law and was sued along with 31 other companies, including Walgreens, Trader Joe's, and Whole Foods. This was a classic shakedown. They were looking for the same amount from every company, despite their difference in size. The bigger companies settled very quickly. We stood on principle, and ultimately we were forced to settle. But in the end, settlement and legal fees cost us $100,000 over an infraction related to $2,000 worth of licorice candy sales into California. How many Vermont businesses could afford to be caught in even one of these lawsuits and survive? Including a private right of action provision will all but ensure that hardworking small business owners will lose their livelihoods. There should be no enhanced consent requirement that mandates browse wrap agreements or the more invasive kinds of pop-ups. This is punitive to small businesses where they never pop up, a windfall for large businesses like Amazon. There should be no data minimization requirement. That language can be interpreted in many ways and will almost certainly result in lawsuits, particularly when coupled with the right of private action. No small business can reasonably expect it to comply, especially when the language is unclear. I forwarded H121 to Rebecca Gray, the president of Gardner Supply, Rob Bean, the COO at Orbis, and Bill Tyne, the CMO at King Arthur Baking, all longstanding Vermont-based businesses and companies that rely on all online sales to support their businesses. We are all in agreement that H121 should not move forward without revision. I've spoken with the folks at the Vermont Chamber of Commerce, and we are in agreement that this bill is particularly bad for small to mid-sized businesses in Vermont, as well as nationally. I urge you to involve Vermont direct sellers in the Vermont Chamber to help develop a better path forward by endorsing a regional privacy standard that takes into consideration the ability of small businesses to comply with privacy law and does not pose imminent threat to their future. I recommend aligning Vermont's privacy law with the state of Connecticut's privacy law. This could be the regional standard today and the national standard in the future. I would very proudly advocate for this position when I'm opening the ACMA conference in Washington, D.C. this May. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts and concerns with the committee and would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, that was very clear, and now we have the added concern that we might embarrass you at this.
Yeah, we don't want to embarrass you,
Right,
Jim.
so-
That's a bad idea.
Question. Yeah, Mr.
No, that's very helpful. So ACMA again is what?
The American Commerce Marketing Association, it's a group of it's catalog and e-commerce companies with some of our suppliers that have banded together to try to stay on top of the issues that are important to us. These days, we focus on three things. It's postal affairs, tax policy, and privacy policy. Our strong wish is to have a national standard. I believe that it may evolve as a national standard plus a California standard, since California has said they will never agree to a national standard.
And you said King Arthur Flower Gardener Supply
And Orbis.
and Orbis.
Correct.
Okay, that's how.
Yeah,
Correct.
those are all companies that I would group in with the country store in terms of.
And the enhanced consent. What are the concerns about the enhanced consent again, please?
That as a retailer, anytime you put in a pop-up that requires somebody to click a button to agree to something, you lose traffic. And like most companies that are selling using Google Shopping, Microsoft Shopping, and Facebook advertisements, about 2/3 of our traffic is coming to the site going directly to a product detail page. When we have to put in a disclosure immediately, we're likely to increase the bounce rate and reduce our sales. If you're somebody like Amazon, you are a destination website. You have the vast majority of traffic going to Amazon's website are people who regularly shop with Amazon, and they've already hit that button.
Interesting. So just one second. So the pop-up is the issue.
Yes, because I think you described this to me, that the difference was between at the beginning of the sale and at the end of the sale,
Correct.
isn't this what you were describing to me?
Yes, and what we do when you go through the checkout process, at the end of the checkout, by clicking checkout, you agree to the terms of service that we've laid out and the privacy policy. Most people do not go forward and read this stuff. This is, I would describe it the same way I think of Apple's, whenever I get an update on my iPhone, you have to go and accept the new operating system. It's, 10 pages of stuff. You simply scroll to the bottom and click yes. There are those who are concerned about these things, and they have an opportunity to decide, do they want to place the order or not? We have been incredibly concerned about this hodgepodge of privacy laws. And if you went to our website and clicked on our privacy policy, it would then ask you what state you are from. And you can pick California or Vermont or wherever. And we have different privacy policies for different states, not because we want to, but because, as you were discussing earlier, some websites have decided they're going to follow the privacy standard in California. I don't believe it's prudent, because I don't believe these things were ever designed to align. I think we need a privacy policy, a standard that we can endorse. California can go its own way, but I don't believe their privacy policy is good. Senator
Roach.
Angus King, sorry.
Oh, would you be considered a controller and a processor? As you look at the definitions of who processes data and maintains data, do you feel clear on how you fit into those provisions?
We are a controller. You had the discussion about how credit card processing works and is it owned by the bank? Most small businesses keep the credit card data in their system. It's not a good way to do it. What we do is, when a customer checks out using a credit card, we pass the data to Chase and we delete it and replace it with a token that Chase Bank gives us back. That token is useless to anybody if somebody broke into our system, they would have a bunch of random numbers that they couldn't do anything with. And most larger businesses have no interest in retaining banking data in their systems.
Right.
Got it. Right.
The other thing around enforcement, private right of action, I have a particularly bad taste in my mouth around that. But I believe particularly for small business, if an issue comes up, the state attorney general has the discretion to put small businesses on notice, give them an opportunity to cure, and use discretion on which businesses have done something that seems to be egregious versus an oversight. That will never happen with right of private action. I also believe, and this goes back to the patent troll comment, and I spent a fair bit of time in East Texas dealing with patent trolls. These things, it isn't common sense that somebody, the 59-day cure provision is nifty unless a lawyer figures out something that is not curable to sue you with. And that, when we were sued by the California attorneys with this shakedown, they told us that it was $25,000 to settle prior to the suit being filed. After the suit was filed, it was $50,000 to settle. They had no interest in ensuring that businesses complied with privacy law. Their primary interest was extracting cash from businesses, 31 businesses that were sued. The other challenge with this approach is when they go out and they ask for that settlement, the money that they collect from those who settle quickly is the money they use to beat down those who chose to stand on principle. It was inconceivable that I would settle for $25,000 over $2,000 worth of licorice sales.
Right.
But in the end, it was much worse than that.
And in the end, you ended up spending, I think, like $100,000.
It was $100,000 over $2,000 worth of licorice candy sales into California.
Right.
And then there were the legal expenses on top of that you incurred?
No, that I pushed them together. So it's the legal fees, and California is particularly bad where there is a cottage industry that does this kind of thing. And in order to do battle, we had to hire a California law firm to work with our attorneys to push back.
So Jim, you heard us talk about the cure period, and I asked you about that, and you were going to look at it. You don't think the cure
The
period?
private right of action doesn't have a cure period.
Yeah, it doesn't.
That's the attorney general.
Okay.
If the attorney general, they
Oh, I thought.
use at their discretion a cure
The
period.
private right of action, I thought also had.
Ours
60 days.
Oh,
This does here in this bill.
how does that
So
work
the
if they're
question I had is,
private right of action?
as you looked at that, did that 60 days help? And if it isn't enough, could we also add a layer so that there were not frivolous private rights of action, so that we had a threshold for that private right of action? Would that help?
I think you can, I don't believe, and I understand we have a lot of lawyers in the room and talented lawyers at that, but you can't anticipate how
Don't have
these
here.
unscrupulous lawyers would twist things to their advantage to enable a lawsuit to go forward. With a substantial cure period, there would be no legitimate lawsuits. The only lawsuits that would crop up are those that are in fact frivolous,
So
like the one I just described.
I missed that. We're establishing there's at least one layer. The cure period is, sorry, could you just repeat your answer? I'm sorry.
I don't believe if these were legitimate privacy issues, a 59-day cure period might work. It would not work for my business. So if somebody chose to file suit in October, our business is dramatically higher. We hire hundreds of seasonal employees to work through Christmas.
Right.
We're shipping anywhere from 12 to 15,000 packages a day. It isn't workable for us to make changes to the software environment during Christmas. So there are plenty of tactics that they can deploy that would blow up that cure period and make it impossible for us to address it without taking on ridiculous business risk.
But the frivolous threshold, if we could somehow raise the and I think we could address that for certainly, but I'm just curious if there was a frivolous threshold that we could establish.
I don't know how you would establish it. This, California Prop 65 that tripped us up, it doesn't state what you can recover. And these practices where you're threatening to sue, offering an opportunity for settlement, and then moving forward with a suit for those who didn't take the opportunity to settle, I don't know how you ban that. I think you're trying to take something that is a bad business practice and build a law around it.
So can I, so how do you not sell in California anymore, or how did you
We-
adapt to that?
We continue to sell into California. We don't sell licorice into California anymore.
Really? Just liquor?
We were unaware of the
$2,500 worth of sales of liquors.
we were unaware that the California law applied to us at the time. And we subsequently are compliant.
Oh, okay.
No, you're cutting out.
Yeah, he's live. Go on with the
Let's wait a
generator.
minute. Let's maybe take our break.
We should take a break. So we'll come back at,
Oh,
Wait a minute. Jim,
No.
can you hear us?
I can hear you. You became
we
garbled
can't
for a minute.
guarantee without our committee.
He can-
speaker that we're live.
he said he can hear us.
you.
Our
I
power
can hear
went
you.
out.
Yeah.
Oh,
We have no power.
Oh, the live stream's still going, but we can't continue this conversation. So if you can hear us, we do have to end. And we can continue conversations, via email and other communication. But we have to finish and
I
Well,
think we got.
we'll come back
Very
at
good.
11 and see where we are tech wise.
Maybe
Thank
they're
you.
coming back.
We should go on a break.
We need to
Okay,
go on
okay,
break.
okay.
That's all.
Thank you very much.
We have not come
Okay.
back because we had no light.
This is silly to just sit here.
Yeah, it is.
So we're going off live.
What's silly is if we aren't live, we can't continue.
Well, you can
Right.
put.
No, we.
Right, no, but I'm just
That's
pointing to
true.
the, iPad. That's how we disconnect.